Oh, look, there's me.
Yeah, there you go. So welcome everyone to this week's BC Wine Weekly, obviously with Paul. Really excited for what he has to share. I think, Paul, are you fine if people jump in with questions during your presentation?
Yes, please. In fact, I'd encourage it.
Okay, perfect. So, and as well, obviously there's the chat there as well. And you can also just message me directly with questions and I'll make sure at the end, we'll have a full Q&A at the end. But again, as Paul said, feel free to jump in. Just a quick note on our next session. It's in 2 weeks with Charlie Grinnell, and we're going to be talking about competitor intelligence, how to find, and we're going to be looking at data from other wineries on what they're doing on social. So he's got some crazy technology where you can actually literally see, he showed me what you can see Mission Hill's entire ad spend online, what ads they're spending, what is working, what isn't working, what kind of things they're doing online. I think for anyone interested in digital marketing or kind of up-leveling your winery, that's going to be quite interesting. So today we have Paul, obviously the founder and principal at VARKETING. I had the opportunity to first see him speak a couple of years ago at the conference that Sandra put together, which was really interesting. And that was kind of what, first made me aware about him. Obviously, as many of you know, he owns the Bowen Island Beer and Wine Cellar, very active, which definitely keeps him connected. And I kind of found it interesting, Paul, you, as far as I could tell by my digging, and please correct me, your kind of sales experience started in technology with computer distribution?
Yeah, well, that's a long, long time ago. But yeah, 25 years as selling technology, and the name VARKETING. In the technology business, there is what was referred to as a VAR, a value-added reseller. And that seems to be just as appropriate in discussing wineries, talking to people who sell their product.
And then how did you make that switch? How did you originally make that switch to liquor?
It's a long story. I got laid off, thankfully, in 2005, and my wife said, "Why don't you go and work in a liquor store?" So I walked into the local one and said, "Hey, I'm here." And since then, it's been all go.
Perfect. Yeah, that very fortunate for the rest of us. And here's just quickly our agenda, and then I'm going to hand it off to you, Paul. So here's what we're going to be covering, or here's what Paul is going to be covering: how wine performed during the 3 months of COVID, or primarily 3 months of COVID, VQA versus imports and other domestic, and then changes in channel and product formats, and then obviously leveraging liquor store relationships. So I think with that, I'm going to stop, Paul, and you can share your screen here and take it away. Thank you very much for joining us.
Okie dokie. Thank you, Chris. I've just got to get this to work now. Okay. Those of you who are as old as I am might remember this.
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition.
And nobody expects a pandemic. So I hope you're all sitting in your comfy chairs, and we'll proceed. So what we're going to do today is wine performance in what I call deep COVID period, which is sort of March to end of May. We're into post-deep COVID. We'll see how light it gets as we go on. Thanks for all being here. Boy, you guys have got a lot of challenges. I feel for you. I was sitting down writing a list of challenges that wineries are facing, and it got too long to actually go through. So this is tough. A sudden shift in how things work is something you can't predict. And I think you have my sympathy and my empathy in what you're doing and what you have to deal with. It's must have been a tough time, a bit of a shock, to say the least. Right. I think a couple of preferences here. The main data source for the numbers is from LDB. It's based on their period, so there's some little differences year over year. For any of you who have attended my previous presentations on strategic plans or Fortify, you'll find some familiar refrains. And this is a data-centric presentation, so stop me and ask questions as we go. So on to the first thing. Here's the good news. Total wine volume in 9-litre sales gained 15% over the 3 months. So in other words, wine sales went through the roof over 3 months. Driven by boxes. These were the stars of the show, and understandably 18-litre plus kegs were the dogs, because with shutdown of hospitality and industry, that's where they're sold. But overall, imports, domestic and BC wine collectively grew 15%, which is not too shabby. The box was the star of the show, right product, right time, but no one could have predicted it. I think in June, I'm seeing box wine sales cool off a bit, but I think they've established a level in the consumer's mind now that they'll continue at a higher level, certainly for the immediate future, than they would have done pre-pandemic times. So they're definitely a thing, as you'll see from my own results. I think one of the questions a lot of wineries must be asking is, should we be in 3-litre box wine? And my answer at this point would be probably not, but you need to think outside the 750 ml box, and I'll show you more of that as we go. The net results for VQA, however, was a 1% drop in litres sold, and I think that equates to around an industry-wide drop in 5% in revenue over the 3 months, compared to the normal three months in 2019. So yeah, it's tough. The 1% drop obviously is triggered by the keg sales, and the 5% drop in revenue is really coming out of the mix-in channel, as opposed to the litre drop, but I'll show you that more as we go on. The other thing to note, this is for VQA registered wines only, not 100% BC, which of course will be kegs. It's not really too surprising. I think it could have been a lot worse for everyone. Individual winery results here, this is industry-wide, so your results will differ depending on your existing mix of or dependency on hospitality. I know one winery told me they dropped by 40%. So that's a huge nut to rebuild. So somewhat depends. And it does say strategically that wineries need a bit more balance in there between retail, hospitality, and that should be an objective going forward, is not to be dependent on any one channel or even any one customer. This is something which some of you will have seen, or at least from past research. For those of you who know, I did a whole bunch of presentations on strategic plan modeling in 2017-18, especially. A lot of research to back it up. And some of this is sort of consistent with that research. As you can see that little bubble there, I estimate, looking at the quarter and looking at last year, the move to wholesale for hospitality on July 20th will cost BC industry about 2% of revenue, which isn't too bad. Yet again, hopefully make it up in volume, and they'll buy more. But I think the immediate future for hospitality is pretty grim, given their capacity limits. So it's going to run at a much lower level for the rest of the year, or at least for the foreseeable future, which means that you do have to focus on retail and DTC, obviously, to make up that drop. So VQA market positioning is driven by what you produce and the pricing strategy, which is driven in turn by your costs. In normal times, and this is what we found 3 years ago, 750 ml format is 64% of total litres sold in BC. So the other 36% is sold in litres, 1.5 litres, kegs, 375 mil. So in the quarter though, this changed to 57%, went down to total liters, down of 750 mil. It is, that's the box wines going up, far exceeding the kegs in terms of volume. But 99% of VQA liters are sold in 750 ml format. So basically VQA is, or BC wine is not playing in a third of the market. And if 750 ml suffers, then you suffer even exponentially compared to imports and domestic. So market share in the VQA 750 ml market is now 27% of all 750 ml liters. That is a slight drop from last year, same quarter, only about 1.5%. And it is actually a drop from what it was 2-3 years ago when it was reaching 29%. So again, market share is dropping. Is that significant? I don't know. But I think it's indicative that there are some underlying problems that need to be addressed. And if we look at this, so there's your 1.5% market share drop. And see that little green chart? If you think about this, if you're playing only in 64% of the market, then what you sell is more like 40 to 50% market share of 750 milliliters. That's considerably more than, say, BCWI would report and saying we only got 20% market share. But if you're not playing in 36%, then you need, then you have a much higher market share in the markets you're playing. And given we don't really play as VQA in the lower end, that means in the intermediate ends to premium, BC Wine probably overall has a 40 to 50% market share today. So in other words, there's not a lot more room to go. There's upside still, but you definitely have a much higher market share than the industry in general would perceive. And that little chart on the top left there, the bars, that was from a presentation in strategic plan. There's 32 different market segments there. And BC is at 30% plus in 13 of them. So that was 3 years ago. So I think, you know, we got some challenges. You're still doing well, but you certainly have a much better market position than generally perceived as BC Wine. Now, politically, I can see it's correct to claim 19% of the total market, or 20%, because then you can go to government and say, well, woe is us. But it's a bit of a false illusion if you think that it's 19% where in the markets that you play in. Where were we? Bing, bing, hang on a second, I lost my note. All righty. But this is entirely consistent with what all the analysis, a more detailed analysis I did a couple of years ago. It is entirely consistent. All right. So here's what happens in the quarter. March to May change from 2019. Obviously, everyone took a hit on hospitality, imports, domestic, and VQA. 75, 77% drop in sales. They were open until March the 20th, and they started rebuying towards the end of May as they planned to reopen. So it's not a complete shutdown during that period, but it's pretty high. The green is the VQA, yellow's domestic. Domestic, though, includes 100% BC wine that's not VQA. That I can't tease out of the data in this set. So that includes kegs, that includes private labels that didn't put through the VQA system and so on. What you can see here, though, is the retail counter BCLS, private retail excluding LRS, so that's private retail stores, agency stores, groceries, and LRS only. The LRSs did by far and away the greatest increase in VQA sales, and from a higher base too. And your DTC efforts in the period, which was your emergency scramble, let's move, really paid off. 13.5% increase in DTC liters. So congratulations, your marketing engines worked. It's if you look in total though, because of the drop in hospitality, VQA was down 1.1% in terms of total volume. Domestics are up 27 and imports up 12%. And that's a huge change, a swing. And as I say, that's probably going to continue. It'll moderate, but it's probably going to continue for the next several months anyway, until we get some form of comfort level with COVID. I'm still seeing a substantial increase in sales in June. Not as good as April and May, but certainly above anything what I would consider normal. So it's carried on in June. The little pie chart shows the distribution of retail to BCLS and direct. So now retail as a whole is 45% of EQA sales. BCLS is, I can't see because I've got a thing in the way. Hang on one sec. BCLS is 26, all retail is 45, direct 24, and hospitality was 5 in that period. So a fairly dramatic change. Any questions on that? No.
I've got a quick one. Just with the understanding some of that difference in this, like looking at those 3 left bar charts there in terms of the difference between domestic and VQA, and just understanding where, for example, there's that, looking at private, you're seeing obviously a big jump in domestic, and in general, other than LRSs, not as large an increase in VQA, and just understanding that difference.
Well, I can only hypothesize. Because you've got a mix of different things. In here, you've got independent wine stores, you've got 2 forms of grocery license, and any other miscellaneous retail agency stores in there as well. That's the important one. So agency stores, which are the RASs, rural agency stores, so they're the people with wine, beer, spirits in a grocery store. Typically, I would expect them to do much better with domestic, which is the ICBs, or the cellared in Canada wines. And obviously, everyone's doing better with box wines, which are by far and away ICBs too. So I think this is just the nature of the existing channels and their markets. Rural agency stores tend to be positioned in small markets. I'm going to say lower income. So economy, as you'll see from my next slide, plays a role there. I was quite surprised that the VQA bar for everyone else wasn't as high as I thought it was. And I don't know whether that means that as people shopped at grocery stores during COVID, they really didn't want to hang around and talk wine or buy wine. I don't know the answer to that. Chip in anyone who had experience with grocery stores and what happened with them during the COVID time. I'd heard they'd gone up 60%, but it wouldn't show up in this. It doesn't show up in this data. Anyone have any information on that front? No. Okay. Anyway, so the LRS has done really well with VQA and with 100% wine, and I think it opens up opportunities for you to carry on and leverage that increased business. And we'll talk more about that as we go through. Hospitality will recover, obviously, but I would say that's going to trend at 30 to 50% of what it was the same ongoing compared to last year. And hopefully your DTC, as your tasting rooms ramp up, and you, as Leslie said earlier, fewer people, but they buy more, will actually pull up and actually increase significantly more over the summer as a percentage. Right, that's the bubbles channel mix. All right, so I'm going to give you one data point, and this is me, all right, over the 3 months, and what I call a consumer flight to safety and economy. My total wine sales were up 56% over the 3 months. rather disappointingly, I beg pardon? What was the question? Oh, no. My total BC was only up 33%. But what you can see is I happen to carry, and have always carried, Hester Creek bag in the box, 3-litre boxes, and they went up 344% in that period. So it was a huge success. They were very fortunate, had that product around for a long time, established channels, and I'm sure it's paid off for them in spades. But if you look at the ICB column, which is gone up nearly 500%, and that's principally bag in box. Very little increase, I would say, in 750 and 1.5 litre, much more so bag in the box. I've never bought so much bag in the box wine. It's like a totally new market. And as I said earlier, I think consumers will now have much more confidence in bag in the box quality and utility, if you will. The other interesting thing is how well the imports did for me versus BC. When I say a flight to safety, the flight to economy is the box for sure. The flight to safety, what happened was as things shut down and every LRS and retailer in the world got inundated with people coming in, early days panic buying, oh my God, we're going to be locked down for months, we better buy enough wine to get us through. We didn't have time to sell. We were basically doing more transactions and doing much larger transactions, and people were making their own decisions. And what I noticed, as you can see, is the USA wines just went through the roof. A flight to US warm, full-bodied cabs. Seasonality may be playing a role there because we're on the cusp from March to May, as winter to spring, and big Chardonnays. And this is not a style that BC does. So I wonder whether without the intercession of us being able to get out, sell properly, run tastings, because my whole tasting program was blown out water and will be for the rest of the year, I don't doubt, whether BC wine isn't quite as strongly positioned in the consumer's minds as I would hope it would be by now. And that's a hypothesis, I don't know. But it is very interesting that all these import categories showed much stronger increases than my BC wine category. And I'm really strong in BC wine. But the largest proportion of my sales is single proportion is BC wine. So it's not like I felt that people coming in saying, give me BC wine, I need it to be comfortable and isolate with. So it was an interesting time. And it does influence I still think the importance of your tasting rooms and the tragedy that they are going to be shut down from a volume point of view, because it's really important in building the BC wine profile. And in our case, by the way, across here, growth came from, I'm going to say, people stocking up, buying more than doing more transactions. We had a transaction increase, but it was definitely, and certainly in April, this, oh my God, I got to buy more in case I'm locked down. And in Bowen, it's been a very relatively relaxed environment. We had one case and that came from off island and they were isolated. So we've been very fortunate because if it got out in the community here, it would go around very, very quickly. But anyway, that's how we saw it. And I think there's lessons to be learned there. And I know that we need to get out. But consumers right this minute are chary of being anywhere for very long. They really want to run in or phone in and order what they know and go again. That we've seen a lot of phone orders coming in for pickup, and for us, a lot of deliveries. Right, wholesale pricing. On the left is my calculation based on the data I have of the average wholesale price for a 750 ml bottle, imports, domestic and VQA. As you can see, VQA is a much higher premium over imports and domestic. That's understandable. Domestic's deflated too because you've got the ICB in there. But this constant premium we've always had over imports is what positions us into these upper market segments. And if you look to the right, oops, gone the wrong way. If you look to the right, and I'll move that again. Here's the average wholesale by channel. So your DTC, that 13% you went up, is 1952 roundabout, give or take, at wholesale value, not what you sell it at. You may be selling it more. You should be selling it more, but your highest wholesale value comes out of DTC. Hospitality, such as there was in the 750s in the period, 1494, and retail, that's collectively across the board, 1338. So as we look at that revenue drop, what you've seen is if hospitality drops off and retail buys more, it's going to pull your revenue down. But those didn't change much over 2019. There was a very small drop off in terms of cents between the 2 years, certainly not significant and certainly not indicative of a trend. But for instance, my average wholesale of a BC wine that I sell is about $15.30 a bottle. So there's some less expensive BC wines, and there's a lot more expensive BC wines, and I'm coming in about the average $15.30 of a typical VQA wine. What else we get here? Wholesale pricing, DTC, and by the way, one thing we noted back in 2018-19 is higher end BC wine. So to move from premium to super premium and super premium plus, the sales of those are led by the wineries. So you're the people out there through your tasting rooms, through your DTC, that are creating the value and the market that the rest of us follow on and try and capture and leverage from. So you're really important that you do that. And I do want to emphasize the DTC number here is a wholesale equivalent, not a retail equivalent. Just a bit about LRS and LP demographics. And before I get to that, any questions from anything that went before? Stunned silence. Okay. How are we doing time-wise, Chris?
Good. Yep, we're at about the 35 minute mark approximately.
Right. Okay. Okay, this is very briefly. Some of you will have seen this at one of my presentations. This is the LRS business demographics. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but 50% of the LRS is out there, buy 75% of all product. The other 50% buy 25%. If we look at an LRS buying $1.1 million of product a year, that's wholesale value, there's only 40 of them. So they should be pretty easy to find. And those buying over 400K, 348 of them, including the 40. So they're your sort of volume targets. And those top 50% LRSs should be buying at least 600 cases of BC VQA each. If they're not, and I have no idea if they are or aren't, some will be buying a lot more, then somewhere along the line, the industry, the wineries have to get out there and get these people to buy their fair share of BC wine and figure out why they're not. For the bottom 50%, on average, they should be buying about 200 cases per annum. Tough to sell to, because you're only going to get, as an individual winery, a slice of that. But that's where your agents really come in. Feet on the street. And again, there's opportunity in those. And by far and away, the lower end, 50% are privately owned or independently owned and not in chains. So they do need individual attention, and they do pay attention to relationships. They're not all driven by price or LTO or what's in it for me today. Over the last 2 years, I've run an LRS benchmark survey, which has been published for ABLE, our trade association. And this is the product demographics of LRSs from the second survey. So this is last year. Obviously, this year is going to be very different with the COVID situation. But you can see here a large store, that's a store with over $4.5 million in sales, would typically have 28% of its revenue coming from wine, a medium 24%, but a small, which is generally those smaller guys, 32%. So the smaller guys do proportionately, not absolutely, more wine than the bigger guys. So again, they can be a fertile ground. I'm officially a dead on the median level of all LRSs, and I do 47% of my sales in wine. So, you know, if I'm excluded, if you will, by a winery or an agency because, hey, it's not very big and it's a BC winery, then there's an opportunity potentially being lost. The normal range is at 12%, so it's plus or minus 12% each. So it could be 16%, could be 40% for large, but they should be in those sorts of numbers. And again, it's a good question. When you're talking to an LRS, ask them what percentage of sales is wine, what percentage is BC wine, and are they essentially, you can gauge whether they're performing under market or over market and whether they become more attractive targets for you or not. I've got something more on this in a second, but we'll come back to this. And I'm getting right through this, a real clip. This is great. Right. Moving forward, some recommendations. This is just really some top of mind thoughts about what happens in the market, what you can do post COVID. You've obviously, with change to wholesale in July, and I know it's temporary, but I can't imagine it's ever going to go back to anything but wholesale. You've got a shift in balance of power between hospitality and LRS. Totally understand that a winery seeks the biggest bang for its buck, and selling to hospitality at a higher price makes much more sense than selling to an LRS at a lower price. But now, if we're price equal, I think that we need to start rethinking some of the strategies about how one deals with LRSs. During the 3 months I've had wineries come out of the woodwork, hey, we want you to sell our product, and offering me allocations of product they only sold to restaurants. One winery, which I haven't had an allocation from in 2 years, suddenly seems to have lots of wine. And as much as I would love to say, take a hike if you can't support us while we're in normal times, why should we support you now? Sadly, well, good for me and good for them, I did buy it. But I think if you're going to go forward from here on, that you have to start allocating fairly between the channels. That's there are some inbuilt challenges in that. One thought occurred to me is, and this is a frequent refrain of mine, is the relationship with an LRS is a long-term strategic repeat sale relationship. It's not a one-off pump and dump. It's not how many cases will you stack. It's how much business can we do over the years together that you can bank on and build into your business plan. And wineries in general have really got to get behind that. And it's something I've been saying for years to you all. And some are doing better at it than others, I have to say. One thing that emerged, I noticed, was I was getting emails from wineries saying, we've got this private label stuff that we've done for a restaurant. The restaurants can't buy it. Will you buy it? We'll make you a great deal. And I haven't taken advantage of any of that. And there is some sense in offering it to us, but I actually had a thought that you'd be better to sell that to your DTC customers. These restaurants that you built the relationship for, if you went out to market those private labels that you've done for, I'm going to use the example of the keg, all right, and said to your DTC customers, hey, we've got this great deal for you, and we know you like the keg, and do a deal with the keg to actually market it directly instead of dumping it into the LRS and damaging potentially damaging your price point for your regular brands, that might actually be an opportunity. I don't know. It was a thought. Definitely got to start planning for continuity of supply for LRSs. If you are supply constrained, allocations are the way to go. I have to say I'm very happy to have allocations. I have one winery that tells me each year how much of a particular product I'm going to get. I might complain, I might wile and negotiate to try and get more, but I'm happy, and most LRSs would be happy at least to have the certainty they're going to get X, if it is a resource constrained product. So I think, you know, discussion on allocations, discussion on commitments with retail is certainly going to be something that you want to focus on. I do think out of COVID, you need to assess who's done well for you. And I think you need to get on the phone and acknowledge that directly and ask how you can keep going. All right. Don't leave this to your agents. They will not do it unless you tell them to, of course. I mean, you get them to give them explicit marching instructions. But unless you actually, as a winery, get on the phone, email, and say, hey, thank you for supporting us in our time of need, and how do we keep this going? I think it'll just go back to whatever sells at the time, and you'll see it fall off. I think there's an opportunity. You've obviously done well in the channel. Now's the time to capitalize on that and do things differently and just acknowledge the channel for what they do. For those of you who've never attended my Fortify session, there's my checklist of 101 things you can do. Well, maybe not 101. That implies in COVID times and pre-COVID and post-COVID times. I'll talk more about that in a second. And there we are. And the other thing that is a continual issue for me and is wineries competing against us. I have this discussion a lot with wineries. Why is your winery price so low? And my selling price is so high. I think, again, as an industry, we need to think about what we're selling at winery and making a better commercial business proposition to the retail channels, especially as you're competing with us by selling direct. So that's always an issue. I've had numerous discussions pre-pandemic with finding that a winery has actually reduced the delta between wholesale and their winery selling price, which is not the way to go. But all these things to get together, there's an opportunity out there to really move forward. Before we get to Q&A, I have one more slide. I want to know if this is useful information. Would you like more? Would you pay for it? And I have a special offer for today for anyone on. And I really need your feedback. This is type of information that we can produce that is not produced by the industry level. So is it valuable? Would you pay for it? But today, and today only if you attend, if you send $25 to BCHF, I will send you some additional analysis and commentary to the slides, my full checklist of a full article on the second annual benchmark of LRSs, which will give you all sorts of information which I think will help you understand LRSs, and my checklist of activities that you need to do with private retailers. If you've been at 45 for the last 2 years, you have it, but if you haven't been there, you won't have it. And that's my reminder to say my time is up and it's Q&A and discussion. Thank you very much. And it's useful, email me if you have any questions.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Paul. That was awesome. Yeah, so obviously just open it up for any questions, comments from people. Please just feel free to jump in.
Oh, did we answer everything? Told you everything. What do you think of the results? Are you surprised? Are you disappointed? Are you pleased? Did you vary a lot from those overall numbers?
I'll speak. Yeah, I did. I was surprised that LRS was up 32% for VQA. That we did not see that. I mean, we were okay, but we were definitely not up at all in that channel. Grocery for us was strong. Yeah, but so I was surprised to see that particular stat.
Well, that's good. I'm glad I surprised someone. Yeah, I mean, obviously every winery has had a different mix of channels and so on. So, and I know you and Harry spent tons of time in grocery. So I'm not surprised grocery is strong for you and LRS is a weaker in that sense.
Paul, do you have anything broken down by price band at all?
No, well, that requires me to spend an awful lot more money than I spent this time.
Right.
Just so you know, I mean, I spent $500 to get that data.
Wow.
Right? And I'm giving it away. So that's why I ask if people will be interested in subscribing, because if I can build a subscriber base, I can do all that price band stuff, and I can do it I could do it quarterly. It's a lot of work, but I've got to have enough economic incentive.
You love it. You love it, Paul.
I know I love it. I'd love to do it. I mean, I do it for free, but
do not. But you love it.
I don't have enough petty cash to go and invest 10,000 a year in BC wine. But anyway, that's so. I mean, it's an open thing. I think there's value because I think it provides this type of data provides an insight that you're not getting elsewhere. You know, I did look at doing price bands, but as I say, the LDB data bill got to $1,500, and I went, ooh,
Right.
that's a bit too much for this.
Yeah, I would just be interested to see. I mean, we know that obviously we've seen a huge increase in bag in the box, you know, any large format. So I'm just wondering if in those channels is that most of the growth was at the, you know, $11 to $15 price range that the majority of us can't play in. But I'm just wondering where the growth perhaps was.
I would say, looking at my own numbers, generally, well, the bag in the box is the joker because it's 4 bottles of wine for the price of 3.
Right.
Okay, so that deflates the whole thing. If you take that out, my average, and I'll take my data point, okay? My average sale of a BC wine, selling price of a BC wine, has not changed during the COVID period compared to the entire of last year. Pennies different.
That's
okay.
Great. Yeah.
So that's the good news. I don't think, I think undoubtedly there was, that the flight to economy was principally in bag in the box, as opposed to, oh, I'm going to buy cheaper imports. I think in my case, the sales to the imports and so on was a flight to comfort, to their safe style of wine or safe region of wine, if you will, rather than an economy-driven thing. Because again, if I look at my results for the same period, my BC wine 750ml average selling price is pretty well similar to my average US wine selling price. So it's not, the US is a little bit cheaper, but it's not like they suddenly went from buying a $20 wine to a $10 wine.
Right.
So if that extends out across, hang on one second, let me just kill that. If that extends out across the universe, then I would say it's not a flight to economy in 750ml. I think we may see a bit more of a flight to economy in 750ml as the months roll by, because there's an awful lot of people who are not working, okay, and will be on EI or whatever. And so the economic impact downstream post even COVID could be quite significant. So, you know, if you're selling a $100 bottle of BC wine, there's not going to be as many people around with the discretionary income that they might have had. So, you know, that I do see a challenge for the super premium BC wines. But no, I would not say that I've seen a flight to price. Then the bag in the box thing, even though it is economy, was really, oh my God, I don't have to go out. I've got 6 weeks worth of wine in my fridge. However, they're back within a week to buy another one. So, you know, people drink a lot more wine when they have a bag in the box. Did that answer your question?
Yep.
Everyone's looking very pensive.
Paul, I'd ask you, have you had any experience or thoughts, advice around cans?
I'm a big fan of cans. You know, what I said earlier on, think outside the 750 ml box. It is not necessarily think bag in the box. It is think about cans. It's thinking about tetras. Quite honestly, it's thinking about liters, which are a big category out there in the 36% of the market BC wine doesn't play in. But yeah, cans. I mean, it's not vast volume yet. I'm selling cans. I've sold, the View have done very well with their cans over the years. Okay, I don't know what they're doing now, but they certainly did well a couple of years ago. But they did 6-packs, and it's a lot of wine in a single 355 ml can. It's far more than a glass. I think the 250 ml can size is optimum. It's definitely a holiday product rather than a year-round product. It's a summer product. 500 ml tetras seem to do okay, and there's 2 glasses, so now you've got 2 of you can share 1 tetra. There's a market. It's not, as I say, it's not huge, but there is a market. And I talked to one. I was up in November and I was talking to one winery and saying, "You've got the brand to do it. You know, you have to sort of push the boat out on your marketing with cans." And I said, "You've got the brand to do it. You've got the price point in terms of what you're selling your normal 750s. By the time you devolve that into a can price, I think you could do it. But whether it would be economic for them to do, I don't know. But yeah, it's definitely there's definitely a market, and I'm going to say a growing one, but it's not going to become the dominant one. That's for sure." More questions? More comments? And you can always email me or call you. Well, you all know where I am anyway, most of you. You can always email me and ask any questions afterwards. But General, did you find that useful? Was this something that was good? Paul, since I can see
Look,
you.
I always find these things useful because you have a better understanding of the business you're in. And so I appreciate that. And, you know, I think as far as paying for it, I guess it depends what the content is. And, you know, it's not something that you kind of have front of mind all the time, but some of the generalizations, certainly looking at that kind of information once a year is helpful.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Thank you. Shilan, any questions from you? No. Angela, I can see you on the screen there. Oh, well, I guess then I can't think of anything. I mean, this is something I could spend an entire morning diving into.
We love it, Paul.
I know.
This is your passion.
It is. In that case, I think, Chris, we're probably done, and I'm going to thank everyone for being here.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. And of course, most of all, thanks, Paul. Really appreciate you taking the time. Obviously, we'll, Paul, if you could send me anything you want to share, because on Monday we'll send out kind of a recap with this will be on YouTube, as always, with a replay up there, and get that out to some of the people that missed. And yeah, so if there's anything you would like us to share in that newsletter, Paul, let me know, and I'll make sure to include that. Any asks or links or resources. So
all right.
Yeah.
And if anyone sends me the fact they donated $25 to BCHF, I'll send you a bunch of stuff for free. Thank you so much. And hey, good luck. Good luck. You've got a tough road to hoe, and anything I can do to help, I will do. Thank you very much. Hey guys.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.